He had been coming to the hall for years, long before most people even noticed the place existed. The building stood between a grocery store and an old repair shop, its paint faded and its sign barely readable. To the people who passed by every day, it was just another forgotten corner of the street. To him, it was a shelter, a routine, and sometimes the only place where he felt close to being human again. Every morning, he arrived just after sunrise. He walked slowly, always with the same careful steps, as if he were counting them in his head. His clothes were clean but old, worn thin from years of use. His shoes had cracks along the sides, and one lace was always tied tighter than the other. He carried a small cloth bag, never letting it out of his sight. No one knew what was inside, and no one ever asked. The people who worked at the hall noticed him, but only in passing. Some believed he was homeless. Others thought he was sick. A few said he was dangerous, though they had no reason to think so. He rarely spoke, and when he did, his words came out slowly, sometimes stopping halfway as if his thoughts had drifted somewhere far away. That alone was enough for people to decide who he was soon. Whispers followed him. He's not right in the head. He's lost his mind. Best to keep some distance. No one remembered when those words started. They simply became part of how people explained him to one another. It was easier to label him than to look at him closely. Easier to laugh quietly than to feel uncomfortable. When events were held in a hall, he always sat in the back. He chose the same chair every time, near the wall where the light was dim. He would sit still, hands folded, eyes lowered. Sometimes he rocked slightly without noticing. Sometimes his fingers moved, tapping softly against his leg, as if following a rhythm no one else could hear. People noticed that too. That's proof. Someone once muttered, "See how he moves." No one considered that the movement might calm him, or that the rhythm might mean something. There were days when children stared at him openly. Their parents pulled them closer, whispering warnings. Teenagers snickered when he walked by, copying his slow steps and uneven pauses. Adults were quieter but no kinder. They avoided sitting near him. They kept their bags close. They pretended he wasn't there. He felt all of it, even when he said nothing, even when he kept his eyes down. He felt the weight of their looks. He felt the way the air shifted when he entered a room. He felt how conversations changed, how voices dropped, how laughter faded and then returned once he moved away. He had learned long ago not to react. Reacting only made things worse. Once, a volunteer asked him to leave during a crowded gathering, not because he had done anything wrong, but because some people were uncomfortable. He nodded, picked up his bag, and left without argument. He sat outside on the steps until the event ended, listening to the noise from inside like it belonged to another world. He was used to being pushed aside. What no one knew was that before his life became small and quiet, it had been full of sound. Years ago, before the whispers and the labels, sound had been his escape. It had carried him through nights when sleep would not come and days when words failed him. Sound was something he understood when people became confusing. It was steady, honest. It did not judge. But that part of his life stayed hidden, locked away behind the careful silence he now carried. The cloth bag he brought each day held more than people imagined. It was light, easy to miss, but to him it felt heavy with memory. He touched it often, pressing his fingers against the fabric as if checking that something important was still there. Sometimes his lips moved as though he were counting, or remembering, or replaying something only he could hear. To others, this only added to the belief that he was unstable. He talks to himself. Someone said once, "He's clearly not all there." Another replied, "No one asked what he was saying." No one asked what he had been through. The hall staff tolerated him as long as he stayed quiet. They let him sit, let him listen, let him exist in the corner as long as he did not draw attention. To them, he was part of the building, like the old chairs or the cracked tiles, easy to ignore. But inside him, something was always awake. When music played during events, even softly through speakers, his head lifted. His fingers moved more clearly then, tracing patterns in the air. His breathing changed. His eyes followed the sound, focused and sharp in a way people never noticed. Once, during a rehearsal, someone stopped mid-song and looked back. "Did you hear that?" They asked. "Hear what?" Another replied. They laughed it off. No one thought to look toward the back. If they had, they might have seen the man quietly matching every note under his breath, perfectly in time. But they didn't look. They never looked. There were moments when doubt crept into him too. Sitting alone, surrounded by people yet unseen, he sometimes wondered if staying was foolish, if the world had already decided who he was. Maybe there was no reason to keep coming back. Maybe it was safer to disappear completely. Yet every morning, he returned. Something pulled him there. Not hope exactly, but memory. A feeling that this place, this hall, was where his story needed to continue, even if no one else believed it. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the tall windows, he stood longer than usual before sitting down. He looked toward the stage, empty and quiet. His chest tightened. His hands trembled slightly. For a brief second, fear crossed his face, not fear of failure, but fear of being seen. A staff member noticed him standing. "Sit down," they said sharply. "Don't wander around." He nodded at once and returned to his chair, eyes lowered again. The moment passed. The chance, whatever it had been, slipped away. To everyone else, it was nothing. To him, it was another reminder of his place. By the end of the day, the hall emptied. Chairs were stacked. Lights were dimmed. He was the last to leave, as always. At the door, he paused, looking back one final time. His fingers tightened around the strap of his bag. "Tomorrow," he whispered, so softly that even he barely heard it. Tomorrow, he would come again, because even if the world had called him insane, even if he had been ignored and dismissed, the sound inside him had not faded. It was waiting, and sooner or later, it would demand to be heard. The next few days passed the same way they always did, slow and quiet. He kept coming to the hall each morning, sitting in his usual place near the wall. People still avoided him. The whispers had not stopped, and the looks had not softened. If anything, they had grown sharper, as if his presence itself bothered them more than before. Something inside him, however, had begun to shift. It was small at first, a feeling he could not fully explain, a pull in his chest when he looked toward the stage. He noticed the sounds around him more clearly now, the scrape of chairs against the floor, the hum of the lights above, the echo of footsteps moving across the hall. All of it blended together in his mind, forming patterns he had not allowed himself to notice in a long time. He tried to ignore it. Keeping his head down had kept him safe. Drawing attention only brought pain. He knew that. Life had taught him that lesson again and again. But the sound inside him was growing louder, harder to push away. One afternoon, the hall hosted a rehearsal for an upcoming event. The room filled with people carrying instruments, equipment, and papers. Voices overlapped. Someone tested a microphone. Another person tapped on the stage floor. Checking its strength, he sat quietly, watching. As a simple tune was played on a speaker, something in his face changed. His eyes followed the rhythm. His fingers moved in the air, slow and careful, as if touching something invisible. He did not realize how clear the movement had become. A woman sitting 2 rows ahead glanced back and frowned. "Is he doing that again?" she whispered to the person next to her. "He always does strange things," came the reply. "Just ignore him." The words stung, even though he pretended not to hear them. Later that day, during a short break, he stood up and walked a few steps forward before stopping himself. His heart raced. His hands shook. The old fear rushed in, sharp and familiar. "What are you doing?" he asked himself. He returned to his chair and sat down quickly, his breathing shallow. A few people noticed the movement and watched him closely. Their eyes filled with suspicion. "Someone keep an eye on him," a staff member said quietly. He heard that too. That night, sleep did not come easily. He lay awake, listening to the sounds of the street outside. Cars passing, a dog barking in the distance, wind brushing against the window. In his mind, the sounds turned into something more, ranging themselves into a shape he recognized. He closed his eyes and let it happen. For a moment, he was no longer in his small room. He was somewhere brighter, somewhere filled with sound that made sense. His breathing slowed. His body relaxed. It was the first calm he had felt in a long time. The next morning, he woke before dawn. He reached for the cloth bag and opened it carefully. Inside was an old, folded notebook, its pages yellowed with age. He traced the cover with his fingers, then closed the bag again without taking it out. Not yet. When he arrived at the hall, something felt different. There was tension in the air. A large event was approaching, and the staff were busy. Chairs were arranged neatly. Decorations were hung. The stage was being cleaned and checked over and over again. He took his seat as usual. As people moved around him, their impatience showed. Someone nearly tripped over his bag and snapped at him to move it. He apologized quietly, pulling it closer to his feet. "Why does he even come here?" Someone muttered. The question stayed with him all day. Why did he come? The answer rose slowly, like a truth he could no longer avoid. He came because this place still listened, even if the people did not. The walls echoed. The floor vibrated. The air carried sound. The hall itself remembered. During a pause in the work, a short argument broke out near the stage. A performer had not arrived. Schedules were tight. Voices grew loud. "We'll lose time if we don't fill the gap." One organizer said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" Another replied. He watched from the back, his chest tightening again. This time, the pull was stronger. Before he could stop himself, he stood. The movement drew attention at once. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. He froze, caught in the middle of the hall, every eye on him. His mouth opened, then closed. Fear wrapped around his throat. I can help," he said softly. The silence that followed was heavy. Then someone laughed. "Help with what?" a man near the front asked, his tone sharp. "You?" Another voice added. "You think you can help?" A few people shook their heads. Others smiled in disbelief. One staff member stepped forward quickly. "That's enough," they said firmly. "Please sit down." His face burned. His hands trembled. He wanted to disappear. "I just meant," he began. But the words fell apart. "Not now," the staff member said, lowering their voice. "You're causing a disturbance." He nodded, shame flooding through him, and returned to his chair as quietly as possible. The whispers started again. "He really has no idea, does he? This is what happens when you let people like that roam freely." He stared at the floor, his vision blurring, but something unexpected happened inside him. The shame did not crush him the way it used to. Instead, it settled into a hard, steady weight. Painful, yes, but also grounding. It reminded him of everything he had lost, and everything he still carried. For the rest of the day, he did not move. He did not rock. His fingers stayed still. The sound inside him grew louder, pressing against his chest, demanding release. When the hall finally emptied, he remained seated long after the lights dimmed. A cleaner passed by and hesitated. "We're closing," they said gently. "You need to go." He looked up, startled, then nodded. Outside, the evening air was cool. He sat on the steps for a long time, holding his bag tightly. His breathing was uneven. His thoughts raced. Was he wrong to speak up? Was the sound inside him just another sign of what people believed about him? He reached into the bag and pulled out the old notebook at last. His hands shook as he opened it. The pages were filled with marks, notes, and lines that meant nothing to most people. To him, they were memories. He traced a familiar pattern with his finger. His breathing slowed. His shoulders relaxed. The noise in his head softened into clarity. "I'm not broken," he whispered. The words felt strange, but true. The next day, he returned to the hall again. This time, he sat straighter. His eyes lifted more often. He listened closely, not just to the sounds, but to the people. Their doubts no longer surprised him. Their laughter no longer cut as deeply. Something had changed. He did not know when or how it would happen, but he knew one thing with certainty now. He would not stay silent forever. And when the sound inside him finally reached the hall, it would not ask for permission. The days leading up to the event felt heavier than usual. The hall was busier, louder, and more crowded, yet he felt more alone inside it than ever before. People rushed past him with lists and cables and instruments in their hands. No one slowed down. No one made eye contact. It was as if he were made of air. He still came early each morning. This time, though, he did not go straight to his chair. He stood near the back for a few moments, watching the stage as workers tested lights and checked sound. His heart beat faster each time a note echoed through the room. The sound bounced off the walls and returned to him, familiar and comforting. He sat down at last, gripping his bag tightly. Inside his head, memories surfaced without warning. Not clear pictures, but feelings. Warm rooms, careful listening, long hours spent alone with sound as his only companion. Back then, sound had been safety. It had been the one thing that never misunderstood him. Those memories also carried pain. There had been a time when people listened to him, when his presence did not make others uncomfortable. That time had ended suddenly, without explanation. One mistake, one moment of fear. After that, doors closed. He swallowed hard and focused on the present. A rehearsal began mid-morning. A simple performance, nothing special. Still, as the tune filled the hall, his fingers began to move again. This time he did not stop them. He let them trace the air slowly, carefully, as if shaping the sound. The man nearby noticed. "Hey," he said, frowning. "What are you doing?" He looked up, startled. "I'm sorry," he replied at once. "I didn't mean to. Just sit still," the man said, turning away. Heat rose to his face. He pressed his hands together to keep them from moving. For a moment, doubt flooded him again. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe the sound he felt so strongly was only noise to others. Maybe it had no place here. Then something unexpected happened. One of the performers on stage stopped suddenly. "Hold on," they said. "Something's off." The music paused. People murmured. Someone checked their instrument. I swear the timing felt strange. The performer continued, like it was pulling somewhere else. No one understood what they meant. No one connected it to the man sitting quietly at the back, breathing slowly, listening deeply. The rehearsal resumed. He closed his eyes. Without realizing it, he began to match the sound again. Silently, his body leaned forward slightly. His breathing lined up with the rhythm. For those few minutes, the noise in his mind disappeared completely. When the rehearsal ended, he felt drained but calm. Later that afternoon, a small moment changed everything. As he was leaving his seat, one of the hall workers dropped a stack of papers. They scattered across the floor. Without thinking, he knelt down to help. As he handed the papers back, their hands brushed briefly. "Thank you," the worker said. The words caught him off guard. He nodded, unsure how to respond. The worker paused, then glanced at his bag. "You come here every day, don't you?" "Yes," he said quietly. "Why?" The question was simple, but it struck deep. He hesitated. Telling the truth felt dangerous, but something in the worker's tone was not cruel, just curious. "I listen," he said after a moment. The worker looked confused. "To what?" He gestured gently toward the hall. "To this place." The worker did not laugh. They studied him for a second longer, then nodded slowly. "Well," they said, "just don't get in the way tomorrow. It's going to be packed. Double quotes tomorrow. The word echoed in his mind. That evening, he did not sit on the steps outside. He went straight home, his thoughts racing. He opened the notebook again and turned through its pages more carefully this time. His finger followed lines he knew by heart. Each mark carried meaning. Each pause mattered. He practiced silently, sitting on the edge of his bed, moving his hands as if sound were pouring out of them. His body remembered what his fear had tried to bury. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine standing in front of others. The image scared him, but it also felt right. The next morning, the hall buzzed with energy. Chairs filled quickly. Voices echoed. The air felt tight, charged with expectation. He arrived early, as always, and took his seat in the back. This time, his posture was different, straighter, more alert. People noticed. A few glanced at him with confusion, others with irritation. "Why is he sitting like that?" Someone whispered. "He's probably planning something." Another replied. He heard them, but he did not shrink. As the event began, performances followed one after another. Applause came and went. He listened carefully, feeling the shape of the room with every sound. Then a problem rose. A scheduled performer was missing. Whispers spread among the staff. Someone hurried backstage. Another checked a phone. The program stalled. People in the audience grew restless. He felt the moment before anyone spoke it out loud. The pause was too long. The air too still. His heart pounded. This was the opening he had imagined and feared. He stood. Gasps rippled through the back rows. Someone hissed, "Sit down." He took one step forward. A staff member moved quickly toward him. "Sir, please, I can fill the gap," he said. His voice shook, but it was clear. The staff member hesitated, unsure. Laughter broke out from a few seats. "Are you serious?" Someone called. "He thinks he's part of the show now." His chest tightened, but he did not turn back. "I won't take long," he said. "If it's not right, I'll stop." The staff member looked toward the stage, then back at him. Time felt stretched, thin and fragile. Finally, they sighed. 2 minutes, they said quietly. "That's it." The crowd buzzed with disbelief as he walked slowly toward the stage. Every step felt heavy. Every breath burned. He climbed onto the stage and stood there, alone, under the lights. For a moment, fear threatened to freeze him completely. Then he closed his eyes. The hall disappeared. There was only sound. He lifted his hands, and for the first time in years, he allowed the world to hear what had lived inside him all along. The lights felt warmer than he expected. They rested on his face and shoulders, not harsh, just present, as if asking him to stay. The hall was quiet in a way that made every breath sound loud. He could sense the crowd without seeing them. Rows of people leaning forward or crossing their arms, waiting to be proved right or wrong. His hands hovered in the air for a moment. He did not rush. That alone unsettled some people. They expected noise, or a mistake, or something awkward. Instead, There was patience, a pause that felt full rather than empty. Then the first sound came. It was soft, so soft that a few people wondered if they had imagined it. It was not loud or flashy. It was careful, steady, like a voice clearing its throat before speaking. The sound moved slowly through the hall, touching the walls and returning to him. His shoulders relaxed. He had not realized how tense he had been until that moment. The next sounds followed gently, each one placed with care. He listened as much as he played, adjusting without thinking. His fingers moved with a quiet confidence that surprised even him. Years of silence had not erased what his body remembered. In the back rows, someone leaned forward. "Wait," a voice whispered. "Listen." A few chuckles faded away. The laughter did not return. The sound grew richer, fuller, not louder but deeper. It carried something hard to name. Not sadness exactly, not joy either, but truth. The kind that comes from living through things without having the words to explain them. He opened his eyes briefly. The faces before him had changed. Brows that were once tight now looked unsure. Smiles meant to mock had frozen halfway. Some people stared as if afraid to blink. He closed his eyes again. This was not about them. Not yet. As the sound filled the hall, he felt time slow. The rush in his chest eased into a steady rhythm. His breathing lined up with the movement of his hands. For the first time in years, he was not thinking about where to stand or how to look or when to stop. He was simply there. A memory surfaced without warning. A smaller room. Dim light. Someone sitting nearby, listening without judgment. A feeling of being safe enough to make mistakes. The memory passed, but the feeling stayed, settling into his movements. The sound shifted. A turn that surprised the audience. A gentle rise, then a fall, like walking up a hill and pausing to look back. The hall seemed to breathe with him. Even the smallest movements carried weight. Someone near the front wiped their eyes without realizing it. Another person lowered their phone, forgetting to record. A staff member who had doubted him stood still near the side of the stage, hands clasped, eyes fixed. He sensed all of it without looking. The sound was doing what words never could. It was telling a story without asking permission. It spoke of being overlooked, of being misunderstood, of holding onto something fragile when everything else fell away. His hands trembled briefly. He let them. The sound did not break. It adjusted, softened, then strengthened again. Imperfection made it more real. The hall was no longer a place of judgment. It had become a shared space, filled with something honest. He felt a tightness in his throat but kept going, not pushing it away, not fighting it. The sound carried that to somewhere in the audience. A child leaned against a parent and whispered, "It's beautiful." The parent did not answer. They were listening. As the final section approached, he slowed, not because he was unsure, but because endings mattered. He wanted the last sound to land gently, to stay a moment longer in the air. He shaped it carefully. The final note did not announce itself. It arrived quietly and stayed, fading slowly until it became part of the room itself. Silence followed. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind that feels full for a long second. No one moved. Then someone stood. Another followed. Applause rose. First hesitant, then strong, spreading through the hall like a wave. It was not wild or shouting. It was steady, respectful, real. He opened his eyes. The sight before him made his chest ache. People were standing. Not all, but many. Faces that once held doubt now showed something closer to wonder. Some smiled softly. Others simply nodded, as if acknowledging a truth they could not explain. He lowered his hands. The applause continued. He did not bow. He did not smile wide or lift his arms. He stood there, breathing, letting the moment settle. A staff member approached him carefully, as if afraid the moment might shatter. "Thank you," they said quietly. He nodded. Another person stepped forward, then stopped, unsure what to say. Someone else called out. That was unexpected. A few people laughed lightly, not unkindly this time. The applause faded, but the feeling remained. He walked off the stage slowly, his legs weak. As he passed the front row, a woman reached out and touched his arm briefly. "I'm sorry," she said. He looked at her, surprised. She did not explain. She did not need to. Back in his seat, he sat quietly as the program resumed. Another performer filled the gap he had been meant to cover. The sound was good, practiced, familiar, but the hall felt different now. People glanced back at him, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. Some smiled, others looked away, uncomfortable with their own thoughts. He did not mind. His chest felt lighter. After the event ended, people lingered longer than usual. Conversations buzzed. His name was not spoken, because no one knew it. Yet people spoke about him all the same. Who was that? Where did he learn that? I never would have guessed. He gathered his bag and stood to leave. A staff member hurried over. Wait, they said. Can we talk? He hesitated, then nodded. We didn't know. The staff member said, choosing their words carefully. You should have told us. He shook his head gently. I tried. The staff member looked away, guilt crossing their face. We'd like you to come back. They said, not just to sit. He absorbed the words slowly. I'll think about it, he replied. Outside, the evening air felt different, lighter. He walked a few steps before stopping, resting his hand against the wall of the hall. The sound inside him was quiet now, not gone. At peace. For the first time in a long while, he felt seen. And he knew, deep down, that this moment was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of being heard. He did not sleep much that night, not because of fear, but because his mind would not slow down. The sounds of the hall still lived inside him, moving gently, like waves after a storm. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw faces again, not judging ones, but listening ones. It felt strange, almost unreal. When morning came, he sat on the edge of his bed for a long time, holding the cloth bag in his hands. He wondered if the moment from the night before would fade once the sun rose. Moments like that often did. He had learned not to trust them. Still, something felt different. He went to the hall as usual, walking the same route, passing the same shops. But people looked at him differently now. A few recognized him from the event. Some nodded. One person even smiled. He was not sure how to respond, so he nodded back and kept walking. Inside the hall, the air was quieter than the day before. Chairs were stacked again. The stage was empty. For a moment, he felt a sharp drop in his chest, like the sudden end of a song. He stood there, unsure where to go. Then a familiar voice called out, "Good morning." He turned to see a staff member approaching, the same one who had spoken to him after the performance. You came back, they said. He nodded. I always do. The staff member smiled gently. We were hoping you would. They invited him to sit near the front instead of the back. The offer made his stomach twist. Sitting there felt too exposed. He hesitated, then slowly took the seat. It doesn't have to mean anything yet, the staff member said. Just to be here. He appreciated that. Over the next few days, small changes happened. People spoke to him more. Not everyone, not all at once, but enough that he noticed. Someone asked how long he had been listening to music. Another asked what kind of sounds he liked best. The questions were simple, but they mattered. He answered carefully, honestly. He still sat quietly most of the time. He still listened more than he spoke, but he no longer felt like he had to disappear to survive. One afternoon, the staff member approached him again. We're planning something small, they said. Nothing big, just a short moment during a community night. Would you want to share something? The old fear returned instantly. He looked down at his hands. What if I can't? Then you don't, the staff member replied. No pressure. He thought about that all night. The next evening, he opened the notebook again. He turned its pages slowly, stopping at a place that felt right. He practiced quietly, not chasing perfection, just honesty. On the night of the community gathering, the hall filled with familiar faces. People laughed. Children ran between chairs. The mood was relaxed. When his moment came, the staff member did not announce him with excitement or drama. They simply said, "We'd like to share a short piece." That was enough. He stood and walked to the stage, his heart steady this time. He did not close his eyes right away. He looked at the room, at the people who once ignored him, at the people who were still unsure. He took a breath. The sound came easily now, not because it was simple, but because he trusted it. He trusted himself. This time, when the final sound faded, the applause was warm, familiar. He smiled. After that night, the hall felt like a place he belonged. Weeks passed. He began helping during rehearsals, offering quiet suggestions when asked. Some were surprised by how much he noticed. Others simply accepted it. He was no longer the man people whispered about. He was the man who listened. One afternoon, a child approached him, holding a small notebook. "Can you show me?" the child asked. He knelt down, smiling softly. "I can listen with you," he said. That felt right. The labels people once gave him did not disappear overnight. Some still avoided him. Some still judged, but those labels no longer defined him. He understood now that being misunderstood did not mean being broken. It meant the world had not learned how to listen yet. On a quiet evening, long after everyone had gone home, he sat alone in the hall once more. The lights were dim. The air was still. He placed his hands in the air and let the sound move freely, not for applause, not for recognition, but for himself. The hall listened. And for the first time in his life, he truly believed that was enough.